Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Browne here with you on this Saturday morning, and let me say something here. Sometimes in this great world we live in, with all this technology, we have all these accoutrements and machines and cameras and everything like that. You still got to remember to hit the go live button. Thank you, Dr. Waller May. And are you having technical difficulties? Let me just plead the fifth on that one. Wow. Well,
this is like the
I knew something wasn't right.
17 minutes of tape and the Nixon Daniel Ellsberg psychiatrist, the Watergate. Right. We have 23 minutes of content that'll never be known unless there's Watergate trial for sidelines.
Wow. And let me just say this. This is just we're working on something new, and I moved some things around. So let me say this real quick. One of our sponsors, we're really proud to have him, Justin Ross, a friend of mine, the Vitamin Shop. He's opened up the first of two locations, 5338 Goodman Road in Olive Branch, Mississippi. And we are live. I'm seeing the ticker now. Live for limited time only. Flavors to superfoods and super shredders. This weekend's lineup of freebies has something for every wellness seeker. Plan to hit us up this Saturday, 12/9, or Sunday, December 10th, to get your samples of the limited edition at Optimum Nutrition. Bottom line is, folks, they're open Monday through Saturday, 9:30 a.m. to 8 p.m., Sunday, 10:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. I go to the Vitamin Shop. I get my shot blocks there. I get goo there. They've got probiotics. They've got all kinds of supplements, vitamins that are important. If you're working out, you're putting a lot of stress on your body. You got to refuel. As important as the workout is equally important the recovery. And the older you get, the more important it is that you work out and that you recover properly. And let me say this. We're on 25 times a month. We always hit that go live button. And from now on, everybody on here make a pact. Rob, don't forget to go live. Unbelievable. But I tell you, at least we're honest about it. I asked Larry Munson, I asked Lauren Smith one time a couple of years ago, I said, in all the years you've been doing radio, and you did it with Larry Munson from 1972 until he retired in 2008, what's the craziest, most embarrassing moment you ever had? He goes, well, Rob, one time I was doing an interview before the Auburn, Georgia game, and it was a wonderful interview, and I got through, and I said, that's some of the best material I've ever had. And Larry goes, oh, forgot to hit the live button. You didn't record. What do you got now? He goes, Larry. So it happens. But
if that's the case, we're in good company with Larry and Lauren.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I love Lauren Smith, and you see the book in the background here. You can see it. Lauren, what do you got? And Larry spelled it kind of in a funny sort of way. But I want to say this. We got a great show in store for you today. And I want to thank Dr. Waller May of the May Veterinary Clinic, Tuscaloosa and Northport. Dr. Wayne May started all this in 1964, folks. 1964. That was a big year in Tuscaloosa. Dr. Wayne May opened the May Veterinary Clinic. Yeah, Tuscaloosa and Northport open every day of the week. Sundays only open for drop-off and pickup at Camp May Veterinary Clinic for dogs and cats. They have a pool there. They have connecting cat condos. Someone like Frank had 17 different cats. They could all stay there together in the connecting cat condos. And proud to have them as a sponsor, and proud to have Dr. Waller May, Dr. Guy May, all the great Mays. There's 5 boys in that family. They're all great Mays. Mayday, Mayday, making sure we hit the go live button. So thank you, Dr. Waller May. And they have, let me just say this too. We've taken dogs down there. They are as kind as you can ever find in a veterinarian. They're very intelligent, great doctors. Their staff, their support people, they will treat you better than family, because trust me, I've seen some family fights over politics at the dinner table or Thanksgiving, and I wouldn't want to say I treat my family, but they are the best at making you feel, hey, we're doing everything in our power. May Veterinary Clinic, Tuscaloosa and Northport. So Army-Navy play today. Let's go back to that. Wow, 23 minutes of content that we'll make it up. But this is a big game. Yeah, this is a big game today. And you think about it, regardless of what happens in sports, NIL, the transfer portal, you don't hear guys from the service academies hitting the portal. You don't hear them talking about NIL. There's things bigger than that. It's their institution, as Frank said, their brothers, their teammates. There's an honor code. Your honor is dearer than your life. And you just talked about it, Dave. But kind of walk us through real quick about what today means and what it's going to be like in the pregame, tailgate, and all, because this is a game it's the only rivalry that gets its own day. Now, we've got some big rivalries, but nobody gets their own day. I know a lot of kids in this world today are kind of wrapped up about when they have their wedding, this is my day. Everything's got to go perfect. That ain't how life works, honey. Okay? This is the day today, Army versus Navy. And not to disclude Air Force Academy, but today is Army-Navy.
It's its own day. Essentially the football season, pre-bowl games are over. It's when Army goes to the American Athletic Conference next year, there's a scenario where they could play Navy for the conference championship and for a berth in the playoff. And then the next weekend, it's the Army-Navy game. The Army-Navy game is not part of the conference schedule. It is its own thing. It's a one-game season. There's a lot of rivalries they talk about. It doesn't matter the score, the records, or anything like that. This is the one where that's so true. That people are saying that, okay, Navy this year is the worst 5-6 team in America, and Army is the best 5-6 team. But the line is 2.5. The over/under is 28. Bet the under. The under has won 18 straight times and 90%. Overall. It's such an intense thing. And to go to the game, which I hope we'll do next year, it's just an incredible day you remember for the rest of your life. Even the inconveniences of life have special moments at the Army-Navy game. One of my favorite moments ever was standing in a long portalet line, and it's tailgating, it's beer, so you gotta go pee. And in front of me are three guys from about my era from Navy, and they tell the story about why they're there. Before they're through with the story, we're all crying, we're hugging each other, saying I love you. We end with they say beat Army, I say beat Navy. We go into our respective portalets. When I come out, they're gone. I wanted and that's it. So I knew these people for all of 2 minutes, and I learned so much about why they're there and this whole kind of same kind of different as me sort of thing. And I'm like, I don't think you get that anywhere else. I really don't. I tell the portalet story a lot, but I think it kind of sums up the rivalry in a nutshell.
Well, y'all are chiseled from the same granite.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
And we were talking in the 23 lost minutes about how grateful we at Army were to go to Baton Rouge to play LSU. And we got throttled 62-0. In past years we took Oklahoma to overtime and Michigan to overtime. We had no expectations of that this year. LSU just has way too much talent and speed for us. But the reverence, the respect we got really gave us some self-confidence, and our season turned around after that. We beat Air Force the following week when we were an 18-point underdog. We're on a 3-game winning streak. We were running some option now back out of the RPO. We're playing really well. I think we're going to play well today. And I think we have a ton of momentum going into next year. And it all kind of turned around that night in Baton Rouge. And so, and everyone that went to the game were revering and how well they were treated. And I've been a visiting fan at Tiger Stadium before, and it's not always that friendly, but it was.
When you're wearing khaki and not crimson, the gumbo bowls are bigger.
And we were in the 23 lost minutes. We were talking about horse racing and Frank's horse and watched it from the fairgrounds. When you go to New Orleans, go to the fairgrounds. That's a great place for a day of entertainment. It's where the Jazz Fest is, but horse racing, and they have some great gumbo there.
The
So-
clubhouse food is really exceptional there. The sad thing is the old fairgrounds sadly burned down about 25, 30 years ago. I was right out of college. And it was one of those old, magnificent, in the vein of Churchill Downs with the steeples and the old plank wood. It was just a beautiful place. But I will tell you, I have had more winning tickets ripped up in that stretch. It is the longest stretch ever. And I won't bore you with a funny story, but I will tell you, one of the last times one of our other horses ran here, when everybody in our party had money on her, and she came into the stretch, she looked like, Secretariat coming in, and she ended up like, Aunt Esther. It was like the bat chute pulled out somewhere halfway in that stretch, and she dropped from first to last. And I looked around, everybody goes, that's why they call it horse racing.
Yeah, it's tough when as I mentioned in the yet unrecorded segment earlier about the dog
tapes.
trial. You can have a trainer take 15 or 20 dogs on his truck from Jonesboro, Arkansas, out to Oregon, and the dog has been trained for years and have an uncontrolled break at the line or not be able to complete a setup. And it's like, hey, thank you for the donation and appreciate you coming out here across the country. They're animals, Dave. I mean, and Dave talks a lot about stuff that Frank knows as an owner of a horse. There's no doubt, as wound up as I am, I now have a trainer. If I'm running a dog in a trial, I'm going to have him do it because they're going, Browne, you are jacked up as JoJo's hat band up there, man, at the line. That dog is feeding off of that, Dogs can learn about 85 words. That's what they know. And if you start screaming at them and they have tuned you out, you just say, no, here. And that's with a horse, Dave, really, they are beyond smart. They're like dolphins with 4 legs, aren't they?
The incredible intuition, like Gene Hackman pointed out in Crimson Tide. But I think the coolest thing about one of the coolest things I learned about my tenure in horse racing is on race day, the trainer does different things to the horse in terms of feeding and the whole routine changes on race day, and that signals to the horse that it's race day. And the testosterone, the estrogen in Frank's horse's case, shoot up, and they get so bowed up and ready to run, and because they know that it's and horses love to run, and all the PETA stuff and like horses. Well, we've got to be safe with them. I mean, it's a sport, and last year there were all the euthanasias at Churchill Downs during Derby week.
Bad year.
But horses love to run, and owners and trainers and jockeys love their horses. And
no doubt.
Yeah.
I've never met a group of people that love horses more than horse owners, horse trainers, and the people that clean those. I mean, they cry when they lose a horse. They are reduced to tears.
All we look for when that horse comes back, how does she recover? How is she? How's she looking? But the best thing that I saw, even though she came in 7th, was when she walked in front of the camera when they were getting ready to take the winner in. I wasn't even looking at the winner. I was looking at how good my horse was walking and how her gait was. And she came back with 4 hooves and everything was fine. That's what you look for.
Yeah, it's like when you have your first kid, just give me 10 fingers and 10 toes. I don't care if it's a boy or a girl. I'll take them hunting either way.
And Rob, by the way, that was a cool feeling. That was the very first time I've ever had a foal that I've been an owner of, a connection with, go make it the 3, she's a 2-year-old, about to be 3 in January. That was the first time I've ever taken one where I literally saw her born. I saw the video of her being born. Wow. To take her to the track. And you talk about, I even texted my horse partner, Scott. We were here in New Orleans because Rhonda had an event last night here in New Orleans. I couldn't make it to Hot Springs. Sadly, I can't wait to go for her next race because we stay at the Arlington and walk across the street to the greatest pancakes in the world at the Pancake House, which I just love, and then go out to Oak Lawn. And by the way, it's so much fun to go on the backstretch in the morning to the stables, to the barn, to see the horses before they run. And Dave is exactly right. They know when it's showtime. They know when it's race day. And my racing partner, texted me and he goes, man, her ears are up. She's ready to roll. Of course, what the problem was that I mentioned in the lost tapes, unfortunately, she was also in heat, which kind of had her a little distracted in the starting gate. I think she was getting a little too friendly with the back of the gate and stayed in way too damn long. She should have broke a little earlier.
Well, it's the most important part of a horse's career, in racing career, is between their first race and their second race.
No doubt.
That the trajectory from first race to second, that trajectory rarely changes.
Yep.
And you look at Oaks winners and Derby winners, how many times in the 150 years history did they lose their first race and then went on an undefeated streak?
Ron has already said, our trainer Ron Moquette in the hot springs already said, she will be holding on to that football in class all week. She will be in that starting gate at least 100 times between now and then.
Yeah. Hey, let me throw something at you now. Next topic. NCAA is trying to fix NIL. Did y'all see the stuff that came out about the NCAA? Every student athlete's going to get $30,000. We're going to do all this stuff to try to fix the game. And when are people going to learn? Congress, those people, they could screw up a 2-car funeral. They do it routinely. The difference is when they make mistakes, they go print more money. We better be very careful about saying we've got to do something to fix, NIL and all this stuff. But the NCAA Thursday, here's some announcements that came up. Create a new subdivision for high revenue schools. Okay. Well, see, if you think about it, socialism and Marxism penalize and go after those who are independent and self-made without the government. You better watch this slope we're going down on in athletics, people. Pay attention. Okay. Schools required to pay each athlete a minimum of $30,000. All Title IX rules must apply. No changes to conference championships. So here's where we're going. Our good friend John Hartwell, the AD at ULM, said on the show with this week, Thursday, 97.3% of the NIL money coming in now is going to male athletes. But if you break that down another level, it's football where the majority of it's going.
Sure.
You cannot, the Supreme Court already ruled 9-0. You cannot infringe or deny an individual. It's in our, Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the preamble, the right to, the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You can't do it. So if an individual or a collective of NIL people are investing in student athletes and paying them, you cannot tell them they can't pay them or how much they can pay them. Yeah. It's called, oh my God, this novel concept, which isn't being brought up much, the free market. If you got a good restaurant, the parking lot's packed. If you have a bad restaurant, there's nobody in the parking lot, okay? You can't make a first impression. Gentlemen, let's talk about this. Creating a new subdivision for high revenue schools. We know what those are. Your top tier SEC schools, they're going to dominate. You know what? Here's the thing. The people that I know that are in the best physical shape and look good, they also are the people that work the hardest and invest the most. And talk about an honor code. Man, people that I've biked with and swam with over the years training for triathlons, they get up on their own and we meet at 5:15, 5:30. Nobody makes them do that. That's what this is. You can't tell people if Frank went to college and got a 4.0 and Dave went and got a 1.0, when you get your grades, when you come home for Christmas, well, you got a 4.0, Frank. I'll give you credit. But we got to take his 1.0 and your 4.0, combine them, get a 5.0. You both got a 2.5. And nobody's going to go for that. That's what this is. They can't do it.
Every step you take away from free market, you take a step toward socialism. And I think you guys know I have a venture capital fund and I invest primarily in veteran entrepreneurs, most of them West Point and Annapolis grads. Yeah. And including a bunch of younger West Point grads who have started an NIL program, and their launch market are women hockey players, women collegiate hockey players. Right? Yeah. Let's nail this. Let's get them, NIL, and then we'll go from there. And I love that because that's the free market at work. That is, these women are going to have an enormous, social and business impact and just, life lessons impact on high school girls, wanting to play sports in college. I love what they're doing, and they're going to grow a business on it, and they're going to make a lot of money, and more power to them. And that's how you solve these supposed issues. You don't do it with subdivisions and all this stuff. I mean, look where baseball's ended up with the luxury tax and all that kind of stuff. That's just, let the free market, there are entrepreneurs out there that want to right wrongs, and let them do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing's been legislated to excellence. Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing legislated to excellence.
It never works. Let's get over here now. A native of Pottsville, PA, Kevin Scarbinsky. I'm going to start calling you the king of the high school playoffs. I have had so many people this past week. We got back, spent a week over in Atlanta, got back late Thursday night. I tried on Wednesday, on Aubrey's birthday. I said, look, we can go to Tuscaloosa on the way back to Memphis and go to the state championship game. We'll take Waller, and maybe John will go with us. They've got great food at Bryant Denny Stadium. She was like, no, I'm celebrating my birthday here in Atlanta. It's not happening. So I counted on your coverage. And about 10:17 Central, I get the news, Cam Coleman, 7A High School Player of the Year. That must have been an incredible game to watch in person. Phoenix City Central, 21, Thompson High School in Alabaster, 19 for the 7A championship, and then take us from there. But kind of fill us in. We've been having quite a fun show. Had an interesting start. The first 22 minutes, I had not hit the live button. Thank you, Dr. Waller May, for reminding us of that. Every now and then you have a momentary lapse of sanity, but so we're right on schedule here.
Well, first of all, good morning, guys. And if my voice is a little raspy and I seem a little punch drunk, I got back, I don't know, I guess about 1 o'clock this morning from Tuscaloosa. What an incredible experience. The last 3 days, the Super 7, the model, I think, for high school football championships across the country. They rotate between Tuscaloosa, Auburn, and now Protective Stadium in Birmingham. And to see the quality of play, to see the passion from the smallest towns in Alabama in Class 1A and Class 2A, and basically the whole town shuts down and they come to the championship game. 9 games over 3 days, 3 games each day. There were 2 flag football championship games for girls on Wednesday to kick us off. And then, as you mentioned, Rob, the largest classification, the 7A state championship game on Wednesday night. Thompson, the perennial power, had won 4 straight state championships. No big school had ever won 5. And they were in only one school, the Hazelwood schools, back in 1988 to 92. You remember the Good family?
Yes. Elm Creek.
They won 5
Creek,
straight.
Alabama.
They won 5 straight in Class 2A. Anyway, but that game on Wednesday night, Central Phoenix City, coached by Patrick Nix, father of Bo Nix, legendary former Auburn player himself. That was an epic game, and it was a who's who of college coaches and college personalities. I stood in the end zone for a good bit in the third quarter, talked to Dabo Sweeney from Clemson was there. Here's a cool moment, guys, that tells you, this is a tribute to Dabo. Peter Woods, incredible defensive lineman from Thompson High School, which is in Alabaster, just south of Birmingham. He played at Thompson, and he is now a freshman at Clemson, just finished his freshman year. He FaceTimed Dabo to see what was going on in the game. And Dabo said, well, I'm sorry, Peter, but your boys aren't looking so good right now. And Thompson did get beat. But Dabo was there, Antonio Langham, Carnell Williams, Wesley Britt. You guys remember the great offensive
I know
lineman?
Wesley. I fished with him.
Yeah, I mean, it was
The biggest fisherman on the river.
And then
He did play in the first SEC championship game.
yeah, Wesley, he came on a set with us one day, and he was so excited to be there and talk about high school football in this state because, and Dabo told me something that was such a tribute to all of these players, coaches in this state. He said, when you sign a player from Alabama, you are getting a football player. You are getting someone, football matters to them. And he said, that's not the case everywhere. It means something in Alabama. And I saw it on full display the last 3 days. I was fortunate. I get to be the host on Alabama Public Television, which brings all of the games to an audience all across the state of Alabama. And then last night, we wrapped up last night with the 6A championship game. I've still got chills. This was two undefeated teams, college prospects all over the field. Ryan Williams, I don't know if there's a better high school player in America than Ryan Williams, the wide receiver kick returner from Saraland. They were trying to defend their championship. He scored 4 touchdowns, a 63 and 77-yard touchdown catch, a Wildcat touchdown run. He returned the second half kickoff for a touchdown, and they didn't win. They lost to Clay Chalkville, which won the championship the year before. Saraland won it last year. Clay Chalkville the year before. Clay Chalkville got him last night, 31-28. And their quarterback for Clay Chalkville, Jalen Mbakwe, won't be his last game at Bryant-Denny Stadium. He's already committed to Alabama, as is Ryan Williams. A lot of buzz that Ryan's going to reclassify. He's a junior. He's going to reclassify, and both those guys will be wearing crimson jerseys next year. Although Hugh Freeze was there last night, he's making a big push to try to flip Ryan Williams. So, I mean, it's unbelievable, the coaches that were there. Steve Sarkisian was there last night with his quarterbacks coach, A.J. Milwee, because KJ Lacey, the quarterback for Saraland, is a Texas commit, and he's only a junior. On the final play, guys, we would be discussing this nationally. Everybody would be talking about this nationally if this had been a national game. Saraland is down 3. They drive 80 yards down the field last couple of minutes. They have 4th and 5 from the 10 with 5 seconds left. They don't kick a field goal to tie and send it to overtime. They run a play. They go 5 wide. They try to get Ryan Williams open. Jalen Mbakwe, the quarterback for Clay Chalkville, he's a two-way player. He's probably going to play DB at Alabama. He lines up one-on-one with Ryan Williams. KJ Lacey, the Texas commit, he doesn't see anybody open. He takes off up the middle. He looks like he's going to score the winning touchdown. And, Doug had the Auburn linebacker commit.
DJ Barber.
DJ Barber makes an unbelievable tackle at the 2-yard line. And I'm standing in the end zone watching this happen. And it's just the elation on the Clay Chalkville players. I mean, they run to midfield and celebrate. KJ Lacey stayed on his knees for at least a couple of minutes. He was distraught. He was heartbroken. And it was just – it's the best of young people in this state competing at a high level. And again, from the smallest schools to the biggest schools, it's an experience. I started doing this last year when Alabama Public Television got the rights. And guys, I've had a lot of great experiences in sports and being around sports. I'm not sure anything could top being around this event for 3 days.
I'm going to raise my hand.
Go ahead.
If I could. So draw a line from those incredible games, the last 3 days to today's game, Army-Navy game. Today is the last game ever for Army's cornerback, Jabari Moore, who played at where? Hoover High. And he's a tremendous student. He's not quite good enough to be considered for the NFL, but so he knows that today's his last game, and I bet he makes a play today. I bet he makes a play that'll help decide the game.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great point, Dave. I mean, there are obviously players from the state of Alabama playing at the college level all across the country. Because as Dabo Sweeney said, when you sign a player from Alabama, you know that football matters to them, that they care about it. It matters in their communities. It matters in their families. And that's what you see. It was a great contrast. The second game yesterday was the 2A championship. And obviously it's much smaller schools. Guys play both ways. And it was Fife from North Sand Mountain. They beat Reeltown, which is not far from Auburn, in an incredible game. 7 of the first 9 possessions, everybody scored touchdowns. Fife runs like the old Notre Dame box single wing, and it's incredible to watch. A guy for Fife Logan Anderson ran for almost 300 yards and probably had 30 tackles. I didn't see the final defensive stats. And again, every person in Reeltown and from North Sand Mountain from Fife was probably there. And it was like the old Iron Bowls in Legion Field on a smaller scale. Every play, there was an incredible roar from either side of the stadium. It was pretty special.
Yeah, and let me do this. We're going to take a quick break. Just got a text from Wesley Britt. He just said, "You're an awesome." He said he really likes you, appreciates everything you're doing. You ought to see him in a canoe with Bama Boyd my best friend from childhood. Boyd's about 5'6". Wesley's 6'8", 350 in the front of the boat. It's absolutely incredible.
Hey,
Wesley
Rob,
caught 41 trout himself.
Hey, Rob, quickly. I thought Wesley, of course, when Wesley came on the set with me, I said, can somebody get me a box to stand on? I look like one of the little people from The Wizard of Oz. I thought Wesley was one of the largest individuals I'd ever been around. Clay Chalkville's offensive tackle, Jaquan McCroy, 6'8", 365 pounds. He's committed to Oregon. And God. I don't have to tell you, they ran behind him a bunch yesterday.
They did. Let me take a quick commercial break. We're going to be right back. This is awesome stuff. Doug Dean just checked in with us from are you at the hunting camp over there in right now?
Marion Junction, Alabama, on the Cahaba River.
Absolutely, over in the Black Belt. Gorgeous country. Kevin Scarbinsky, the Birmingham Lede. Dave Tompkins, Savant Saturday over in Beaufort, South Carolina. Frank Duffy at his place down in New Orleans in the French Quarter. And I'm broadcasting from the Cherry Farm in Cross County, Arkansas, right outside of Memphis. Take a quick commercial break. We will be right back on the day Army and Navy will play.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought-after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal. And the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.
My hot take this morning is why Kirby Smart was not able to three-peat.
Yeah, curve everything else. Win, 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 win. Win. These ops ain't lit. Mommy. Win, win, win.
All right, I'm going to tell you what, Kevin, again, the job that Alabama Public TV does, it's absolutely – Public TV does some of the best stuff that you'll see anywhere coming out, on TV, because that's all they do. They're not trying to do 20 things at once, and I'm glad you did it. Doug Dean, check in here with us, man. I thought you had a deer this morning. The chatter looked like you had dropped a 14-289-pound buck that's in his prime, but that was the wrong chatter.
You duck hunters, I love you, because y'all are conditioned to think that every time you walk out in the woods or the water, you come back with something for the dinner table. And deer hunting is more like you hunt about 30 times and see squirrels and rabbits and hope for an opportunity. So it's just very different. That was a great morning, very foggy here in central Alabama. Had some rain last night, more coming later today and tomorrow. So everyone be careful about watching the weather. Hey, First of all, Duff, about your thoroughbred. You said her first race, she came in 7th.
Came in 7th, and we were happy that she at least broke ground. She was way back, but came on, and she had a lot of horse left in her, so we're hopeful for the next one. We just got to get her off this heat that she's on, because she was having a love affair with the back of the gate and wouldn't leave the damn thing, rubbing her rump up against it.
Well, I guess I wanted to say, you need – I don't know how many horses were in the race, Duff, if she came in 7th. but we can't go soft. This is the SEC country. It just means more. And I assume you had her running stadiums this morning, right?
No, she will be in that gate more times than not this week. It's akin to having her carry her football to class.
There you go. No, seriously, that's going to be fun to follow. And I might, if she's in the next race she's at, if we can get there, I wouldn't mind dropping a buck or two on her. But and then, Kevin, I wanted to congratulate you and thank you for covering the high school championships and playoffs. You really brought some, here's a big word for you, gravitas to that whole set, Kevin, because you really know football, and I know that you have a love for in-state football because it feeds these pro Alabama and Auburn, Troy, UAB, all of them. But, it amazes me, guys, and I hate to have to be the one to talk about this with the Saraland coaching decision on that fourth down, but you can watch football. They go to clinics. There are websites. There's textbooks. We watch it on week after week after week, and you see fundamental coaching mistakes arguably cost a team the win. I realize on a 4th and 5 they were running out of time, but they could have gotten the first down there and maybe gotten another play or two off. But honestly, that was a kick the field goal there. It was like an extra point. And I just don't understand, like Mario Cristobal this year, not taking a knee and costing his team the Georgia Tech game. These guys make millions of dollars at the college level, and you would think there would be an artificial intelligence that tells them, like when you're 4th and 5 at the 10, running out of time. I'm thinking that's maybe a 15% probability you score there. But if you go to overtime, at least you've got arguably a 50-50 probability. Was that how you saw it, Kevin?
Well, it's interesting because it just felt like, and I was standing under the goalpost. I positioned myself because I thought for sure they were playing for the field goal. Jeff Kelly at Saraland has done an outstanding job. He's won a gazillion games in 13 years there. They had the longest winning streak in the state. They had won 20 straight going into last night. And it looked like he was playing for the field goal to tie because he had let the clock run down to 5 seconds before calling his last time out. But after the game, he said, obviously, he thought about a field goal, but he said he had confidence in his field goal kicker who had missed one earlier in the fourth quarter, which makes you wonder. But he also said they had a fake field goal installed that he felt good about. So can you imagine if he tried a fake field goal? It is kind of head scratching. And look, I know you've got playmakers. KJ Lacey's going to Texas. Ryan Williams committed to Alabama. Auburn's making a big late push here. He's probably going to recommit to play college football next year. But come on, the odds say you got to kick the field. And you know what he said about overtime? The way that Clay Chalkville was moving the ball, and they controlled the time of possession. Behind that 6'8", 365-pound right tackle who's going to Oregon, he was concerned that they were the more physical team and they were going to grind it out, and it was going to be a little harder for him in overtime. But that one's an all-time head scratcher for sure.
Well, and that's more legitimate, Kevin, than only rushing 2 guys on 4th and 31. I'll give him that.
Who would ever do that?
Wait a minute. 2 guys.
Can't imagine.
Auburn didn't rush any guys because the 2 guys that were supposed to rush basically played a little patty cake with the offensive lineman. And so basically they had 3 guys standing around trying to keep Jalen Milroe from running when you should hear Bill Clark, the former UAB coach.
Lose his mind on that.
He was at the Super 7. He was one of the analysts, and he was on the set with me a bunch. You should hear him talk about that last play of Auburn defense. I won't say what he said. Well, Bill's not a guy who would use 4-letter words, but
it was coaching malpractice.
I
was sitting there in the north end zone at row 10 and where all the drama went down. And it's so funny, but I don't think I've ever seen a football play in that spot where it's, desperation play, that much yardage to go, in which the defensive coordinator would drop all 11 back to the goal line. But then may as well have done something that idiotic, to your point, Kevin, because
that would have been better. Doug, that would have been better. They would have been better off giving Milroe an engraved invitation to run.
Well, hey,
Yeah,
listen.
he had 2 sandwiches before he had to throw it.
Bill, it's interesting. Bill Clark he's a defensive guy. That's the side of the ball where he made his bones. He said he said, here's the problem with giving him time to throw. He said you could put 11 guys, you could drop 11, as you guys just said jokingly. He said you could drop 11, and if you give that quarterback enough time, somebody will find a window. They will run a pick. They'll do something. They'll get a guy one-on-one in the corner, which is exactly what they did. They ran guys across to clear out a little bit of an area for from Isaiah Bond to get a one-on-one situation, and which is exactly what he said. You've got to put pressure on the quarterback. You got to make him move. And if he runs, that's great. You want him to run because there's no way he should run through 11 guys for 31 yards.
Nope.
Yeah, I only regret even bringing that up, Rob, because I get to relive it right here. But that's football. Hey, I wanted to get the group's opinion on – I've been thinking about this. I said I'm here to redeem my ticket, Rob. I bought a little friendly wager that Georgia would not three-peat. And it's not that I felt that Georgia wasn't the strongest team in the SEC starting the season. Yeah. I just believe betting on history when you have to go back to the 1930s when Minnesota three-peated. I don't even know anything about that era. But that I think Georgia fans, forget what I think, but I think if you talk to most Georgia fans, they'll say it against a very good Alabama team, their Achilles heel, which is Mike Bobo, that's my opinion. I believe that would be a consensus opinion of most Georgia fans, the ones I talked to, that he's solid, but what Kirby needed when you got to big games like that and playoff games, he needed a truly elite and creative offensive coordinator. And I'm seeing more and more of that from Tommy Rees, Saban's coordinator. I didn't know a lot about Rees at Notre Dame, and he's young, but he's done some pretty brilliant things. Some of them are subtle about late game, letting Milroe design run plays to ice the game. But I think getting the Kirby's tragic flaw this year, which is forgivable, is that he couldn't help himself getting the band back together. Kirby played at Alabama 95 through 98. Mike Bobo was there 93 to 97. Will Muschamp before them, 91 to 94. And, of course, Muschamp hired Kirby Smart at Valdosta State. So they worked there together. But my point is, I just think they were fine on the defensive side of the ball with Glenn Schumann, who worked under Saban. And he and Muschamp were co-defensive coordinators. But they were a little lacking in creative offensive play design and in-game play calling when they ran into a defense like Alabama's. I'd love to hear you guys' take on that.
Well, I know one thing. If you bought Tommy Rees stock in the fourth quarter of the University of South Florida game, you could retire right now.
Well, I'm Kevin is a subject matter expert here, but I think the unsung hero for Alabama's team this year is Tommy Rees. Yeah, the job that he has done and making Jalen Milroe, and of course, more credit belongs to Jalen, but to make him arguably now the most dangerous quarterback in except for the guy that's going to win the Heisman tonight from Baton Rouge. I think it's a masterful job Tommy Rees has done, and I hear that he was not Coach Saban's first pick for offensive coordinator. But at this point, I am super happy that he's our offensive coordinator.
You should be.
Yeah, and Kevin, I got to ask you. I mean, and also Kevin Steele's role on this Alabama team, and I felt like he would be a huge reason for their success. But I told Rodney Orr, who's on the show every week with us from Tider Insider, and Gary Harris as well. I said, I think I've seen Nick Saban coach this year more than I can ever remember. And I think he's going to look back on this as maybe the favorite team he's ever coached. I said this 2.5 months ago. And I said, because we've heard the dynasty's dead. It's all over. The game's passed him by. And that's just not true. But Kevin Steele, Tommy Rees was just ridiculed, raked across the coals. And in my opinion, Jalen Milroe was suspended for some stuff that happened after the Texas game. I think Nick Saban said, enough. I'm not going to have all these other people in my face trying to tell me what to do with this team. And I think he made a point also that if you think that Jalen Milroe isn't the answer, what do you see who backs him up? And then you barely beat South Florida 17-10. And I got to give credit to my man Jerry Kirby up in Clarksville. Monday of that week, they were 35-point favorites against South Florida. He said that's a 7-point game going into the fourth quarter. If Alabama has a turnover, they could lose this one. And I was like, I said, what are you sniffing? Glue? But look what happened. But what Doug's right, what a turnaround. Both coordinators. Saban may have lost more hair than he's ever lost this year, but I think he's had more fun. And in a crazy sort of way, it ain't good for their opponents. He's kind of re-energized, and I don't see him checking out. But again, you got a better insight than I do, a lot better.
Well, I'll give you some interesting insight from a former Alabama player who was at the Super 7 this week. You guys will remember Wallace Gilberry.
Yeah.
Incredible defensive end.
Absolutely.
Undersized, had no offers until a high school all-star game coming out of South Alabama. Started for 4 years at Alabama, led him in sacks, tackles for loss every year. Played his last 3 years under Mike Shula, his first year under Nick Saban. And he said, isn't it interesting that Nick felt compelled to bring Kevin Steele back to kind of reinvigorate the standard that they set, especially on defense. And he also, Wallace said when he was at Alabama, he had 4 different position coaches on the defensive line in 4 years. Think about that. He said that is so hard to do when you don't have continuity on your staff. And that's one of the things I think it's been overlooked. Yes, Alabama has dropped off from the standard they set in 09, 11, 12, 15. But the turnover in staff members has been incredible. There are only so many Steve Sarkisians calling plays. There are only so many Kirby Smarts calling defenses. There are a lot of good coaches, but there are very few elite coaches.
Right.
And those elite coaches were going on from Alabama to get head coaching jobs.
Yeah.
And so Wallace said that's really what's been going on. But he said he was really glad to see that they brought Kevin Steele back to help reinvigorate that defense. And certainly he did that. And then on the offensive side of the ball, what Tommy Rees has done, obviously there were growing pains there. He had to learn what Nick Saban wanted. He had to learn what Jalen Milroe could and could not do earlier in the season. And the things he couldn't do, he does a lot better now. And I can't finish this though, Doug. Who was Brian Harson's first offensive coordinator at Auburn? Mike Bobo.
I know. Bobo.
And let me tell you guys, you'll recall that it did not end well for Mike Bobo and Brian Harsin together at Auburn. I was told there was a memorable parting meeting between the two, and I can't remember which house it was. I believe Bobo went to Harsin's house. And let's just say a word that starts with F was uttered by Bobo to Harsin, because Bobo was basically saying, "Look, you either got to let me run the offense, or I can't do this." And then it ended up with him saying a word that started with F, followed by the word "you," and Harsin's uttering a word that starts with F, fired. You are fired. So it didn't end well. But when my antenna went up when Kirby hired Mike Bobo, absolutely.
Well, look at the game last week, and Georgia has their first drive, and and then the next 2 drives, Alabama's response drive, and then Georgia's offensive drive after that. At that point, my uninformed amateur opinion was we've won this game. I mean, we're going to outcoach them, and we're going to prevail. And I think that's what happened.
And looking ahead to the Rose Bowl, I'd be curious, Dave, if you had the forecast, how well will Crimson Tide fans travel to that semifinal? Because we all have budgets, and I'm sure they think we're going to take Michigan. I'd rather go to the national. Some will go to both games. I get it, but if they're those that are there sitting there, we'll hear their fight song in the Rose Bowl. Remember, the Rose Bowl will win. Then how cool is that? But I look at that. I think Vegas has the wrong team favored in that Alabama-Michigan game because the air went out of the room in Ann Arbor when that fourth team selection was made, and that was, Harbaugh can certainly rally his guys and get them to, play the "we're not respected" card, or however he chooses to do it. But you couldn't make me lay any money on Michigan in that one. It feels to me like Michigan has almost already lost that game.
I think the Michigan fans will travel better to Pasadena than the Alabama fans. I mean, it's the Rose Bowl, it's their tradition and everything. It's kind of it used to be an annual rite of passage for them. And I think Michigan's going to hang around for a while and maybe have the lead for a while. But I think ultimately, from the middle of third quarter on, I think Alabama's going to dominate.
I've seen that look in the Michigan room before. It was in the mirror in Louisiana in December of 2011.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hey, listen,
I've seen that before.
Auburn people understand during that 9-year Bear Bryant run, there were a couple or 3 years there where a lot of Auburn people would be big enough to admit they lost the game before it kicked off. They'd look on the other side and see Coach Bryant leaning against that goalpost and that Alabama logo. They just didn't feel like they could win. At some point, you got to break through that and believe. But the thing to me that this year, if Saban goes on to, in some ways, even if he doesn't make it all the way to the title and regain the throne, what he's done this year, what's impressive is 2019 through 2022. You could go farther back than 19 if you want to, but Saban decided, to his credit, that he had to go high octane, a little more finesse to win how football was being played then. And that if he hadn't done that and gotten coordinators that know how to do that, like Sarkisian, Kiffin, then and Bill O'Brien, but he probably wouldn't have signed Tua, probably wouldn't have signed Bryce Young unless they knew they were going to be in offenses like that. And yet, he evaluated the not getting there and losing ground to Georgia the last 2 years before this one. And it's a real tribute to Saban's adaptability that he said, no, we got to be able to score, but I really want to be a physical, tough running team, and I want to play defense. And so it's taken some time this year, but that's what they bring to the party that we'll get to see how it matches up with some high-octane teams, especially Washington and Texas. I think you're going to get an Alabama-Texas rematch.
Yeah.
And I want to see them play before I pick that one if it comes about.
No one has agreed with me on this point yet in all my texts and stuff. But I think Texas is going to throttle Washington.
I do too. Yeah.
Yeah. Even though Washington's got 13 fifth-year seniors, 13 sixth-year seniors on that team. And it's funny, who was the Pac-12 player of the year on offense? Michael Penix Jr. or Bo Nix?
Bo
Nix. Yeah. My friend Dave Cody, longtime sports anchor, lives out in Bellingham, Washington, and he sends me stuff every day. Said that's what the coaches out there think of Bo Nix. I think Texas, what people aren't talking enough about is, Rodney Garner is regarded as an elite defensive line coach. Bo Davis, equal.
Bingo.
And when Bo Davis left Alabama, there was a significant drop-off in the quality. But Kevin Steele, man, this is one of my favorite coaches ever. He is from Gordo, the 8 Mile War. What is it, Gordo and Reform? I think that Gary always talks about that. But he's going to make everybody around him tough. And Doug Dean, you remember his locker room speech a few years back about adversity? And I can't repeat it because the decorum prohibits. I sound like Niedermeyer at the IFC meeting in Animal House. But it was about adversity. And he said in so many words,
a Roman
God bless America. Don't you wait. He goes, you be their adversity. Get after their. But that's what you want as a coach. That's who you want to play for.
That was in the Benz, Rob. Was it? I forgot the year, maybe 2015, opening one of those kickoff classic games. And what Kevin
2018
Steele
before the Washington game, August 31st.
We had Derek Browne and help me, number 3, Rob.
Marlon Davidson.
Yeah. And so he was in the locker room and he was telling his guys, we're going to be their adversity. They're going to see 3 and 5 can't sleep on the plane. That was the line. You know, that he was telling them, you're going to be a nightmare for these guys. And that I like that part of Kevin Steele. I really
And when we were at Mercedes-Benz Stadium last Saturday, and I'm telling you, I did not know I was going to Atlanta until Thursday, right after the show. Auburn said, Mallory really wants us to come. So we just deployed, and I didn't even get press credentials. And good luck trying to buy tickets. The cheapest we saw was $300, and I didn't trust the people selling them to me because they were trying to sell me a paper ticket. And I said, dude, they're all electronic. He goes, but this one will work. I said, well, let me take it up to the lady and let her scan it. And he ran off. So I'll just leave it at that. But the thing, that game, when Auburn played Washington, that game, there were about 7,000 or 8,000 Husky fans there. And in Atlanta, we took the MARTA from Brookhaven, Billy Roberts and I did. Just being down there, we stayed around the stadium talking to people for 3 quarters. Then we went and got something to eat. But it was unbelievable. There's just nothing like the SEC championship. Kevin, Doug, Frank, Dave, y'all know this, and everybody listening. It is. They were talking about average ticket prices for the Big 12 championship were about $56. The ACC, I think they were giving them to people. That should not be the case.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you something. Somebody said on this show a couple of days ago this week, we've had so many great guests we're blessed to have, and this is a team effort. It's never me. It's all of us. But he said, you better be – it was Ben Troop yesterday said, you better be careful about bashing your own conference. All you ACC haters that hate on Clemson, hate on Miami and Virginia Tech, that's the very reason why Florida State was left out of the playoff, because their conference was perceived as weak. And I think there's a lot to think about there. Let's tap into one of the great writers in the free world, Kevin Scarbinsky, a native, proud native of Pottsville, PA. And I bet he's been to the Warehouse District in Pittsburgh before and had him a Permane Brothers sandwich before.
An Iron City beer.
Listen,
Yeah.
I spent I grew up in Pottsville, which is the home of Yingling beer. And
oldest brewery in America,
as I did, yes, going to St. Patrick's grade school and St. Patrick's Church, right across the alley, and it's not even a street; it's a very narrow alley. Across the alley from the corner of St. Patrick's Church is Yingling's Brewery. So my formative years were spent, and during Lent, we would start the school day with mass. And then we would wear coat and tie. Which is why I detest wearing coat and tie today. But you would walk out of
trifecta.
And if you've ever been by a brewery, it's not a pleasant smell.
No.
And so that's why I don't drink beer today, guys. I grew up every day as a child walking past the horrible smell of Yingling Brewery. Now doesn't taste like it smelled in the brewery, but anyway, that's my
Guinness
years experience.
It smells like a paper mill.
Yeah.
Yes, that's maybe the second most unpleasant smell you can encounter, right, Frank? Driving down 280 towards Auburn around Childersburg, right?
Yeah.
That hits you. That smell hits you coming down the river. But I spent far more time. I'm almost embarrassed to admit how much time I spent on Twitter on Sunday and Monday slapping down Florida State fans about the differences between the SEC and the ACC. And I can't tell you, first of all, some of them would say, well, yeah, but the SEC just plays 8 conference games and they beat, well, so does the ACC. Well, wait a minute. But the SEC plays all of those cupcakes in November. Who was Florida State playing when Jordan Travis got hurt? The University of North Alabama, which is just transitioning to the football bowl subdivision. Well, wait a minute. The ACC was 7-9, was 9-7 against the SEC this year. Okay, let's look at who played whom in those games.
Yeah.
Again, it was just there was no comparison, and that's what hurt Florida State. And Florida State, again, be careful of whom you criticize, because Florida State, we heard from some of their biggest boosters, they were ready to tell the ACC, see you later. They were trying to devise ways to get out of that grant of rights, one of the most ridiculous contracts anyone has ever agreed to with ESPN, or with the conference, basically granting your rights till when, 2030 something. So, yeah, Florida State has no one to blame but themselves. And the committee followed its own rules. Head-to-head, there was no head-to-head. Strength of schedule matters. Alabama's was 5th. Florida State's was number 55. It wasn't close. And they have a provision for the unavailability of an injured player. It may not be fair. It may sting. And if it were reversed, everyone who's an Alabama fan would feel the same way. But those are the rules. They followed their rules. And that's, sorry, Florida State. And hey, but it's interesting, guys, if you have any sense of football history, for Florida State to be upset about this when, let's see, the first BCS championship game against Tennessee, Florida State had to play a legendary backup named Marcus Outson, who went 9 for 22, fumbled 3 times, threw 2 interceptions, including a pick 6. Tennessee won by 6. In 2000, Oklahoma's undefeated. They're in the BCS championship game. The second spot comes down to Florida State and Miami. They're separated by hundredths of a point in the computers. Miami and Florida State played each other. Miami won. Florida State got the nod to go to the BCS championship game. They lost to Oklahoma 13-2. Florida State had some good fortune through the years in terms of national championship games and getting in playoffs.
Yeah, and if we as fans and opinions, this is really the most inflamed I can recall the playoff selection. Maybe I'm showing my orange and blue here, but 2004, there was a lot of controversy, especially in Lee County, Alabama. I'm not sure nationally going into that game in 2004 that most people thought, because they were both blue bloods, that USC and Oklahoma were not a bad choice. But but this one feels there's more claimed moral outrage, Kevin, over this one than I can recall in a long time. But if FSU fans are to be fair, fans usually are not, but you have to go back to who is the patriarch of Florida State football, the great Bobby Bowden.
Yeah.
And they were independent. And this is probably an unfair application of history, but it still bears on how did we get here, Seminole fans. They were independent. They chose, was it 1991? They chose the ACC. And it was well documented that the decision makers, including Bobby Bowden, said the SEC is too tough. Our best chance for our program to have a lot of success is to stay in the ACC. And I believe if they had been bolder and accepted the invitation to join the SEC, the money would have poured in, the branding, and Florida State, I believe, would have at least 1 or 2 more national championships over this time period than they currently do. And then, as a friend of mine just reminded me, it was Florida State and those group of Big Ten and ACC, if I remember, that disagreed with. They were vindictive about the SEC taking Oklahoma and Texas, and they refused for the 12-team format to come in this season. And if they had done that, ironically, Florida State would be in.
Hold that thought, Kevin, hold that thought. I got to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, this is what no one's talking about. First time ever, we had 4 unbeaten Power 5 teams going into the conference championship weekend. That's never happened in the BCS or the CFP era. It adds to the intrigue, the controversy, but it's a hell of a lot to talk about. Hour number 2, right back after this.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with
Welcome to Rumble, bringing half boxing, half strength, and 10 rounds of fire. Pull up, say what's up to our studio team, check in and grab your gear. Don't have gloves, don't have wraps, don't worry, we got you.
You think you better than battle rap?
Find your starting spot. B means bag, F means floor. Make your way to the studio, find where all the magic happens, give Jab a little love on the way in, or snap a pic for the gram. Tap in with your trainer and get ready to bring the thunder.
Pond looked good.
All right, Rob Browne back here with you, and this Saturday, great stuff. Hour number 2. Love this discussion. This is great stuff, Doug. Incredible
Rob.
To bring this history all in here. So yeah, Doug, take back up.
No, I'm sorry to jump on you there. I just want to add one little interesting hypothetical to this debate about Florida State. I personally do. I'm repulsed by the rule about if a key player is injured, because it forces the committee to pretend that they can predict outcomes of games. Here's the hypothetical I would love opinions on. What if in the SEC championship game, heaven forbid, Jalen Milroe goes down with a season-ending injury? He's not going to be well by January 1, and the committee, but Alabama wins it. The committee does the committee leave Alabama out in that scenario? I'm not so sure they do.
Absolutely. Florida State.
You're saying they should. I'm not so sure they would have actually chosen Florida State over Alabama in that scenario.
That's where we would have discovered the power of the Alabama brand, right, Dave?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't know. I actually think that they would have picked Florida State if Milroe had gone down. But that's a total, opinion. There's no fact behind that.
Pure hypothetical. We'll never know.
What's interesting about that is we saw Alabama's backup quarterbacks against South Florida.
Yeah. Exactly.
It didn't go well. So that memory, even though that was obviously many months ago, would have been there in the committee members' minds. But how much would they have overlooked that and said, well, this Alabama team is different now than it was, just as you could say it's a different team than the one that played Texas. But the biggest difference was the maturation of Jalen Milroe.
Right.
That would have been fascinating to see had that scenario played.
I would be betting on the power of that scripted A and the branding and image of Nick Saban. And ironically, they would be talking about how, well, Alabama's just defensive oriented. Haven't we heard that from Seminole fans? And so it's unknowable. I just thought that, thank God we're going to a 12-team playoff. And then this time a year from now, Rob, we'll be arguing over that team that got screwed being ranked 13th.
Yeah.
I love how coming from Kerry J basketball. So it would take me 45 minutes on Google to come up with an example where an ACC basketball team with a losing conference record gets in March Madness, and another team that gets to the conference final in their supposed power conference, doesn't get in. That ACC team gets, their butts handed to them in the first round of March Madness, and then the team that got jilted wins the NIT. I think there's probably multiple examples of that in history, but yet no one ever talks about that. Oh, well, it's the ACC. It's the basketball conference.
Yeah, and you do know that Kevin is the first and the only sports writer in the state of Alabama's glorious history to be inducted into the U.S. Basketball Writers Hall of Fame. That was last year, the opening weekend of April, the weekend of the Final Four out in Houston. Kevin is a hell of a basketball writer. As great as he is with football and high school football and all, he's on another level when it comes to basketball. And we're going to be having a lot of fun on these Saturday roundtables as we cover basketball. But Kevin, along the lines of what Dave just said, take that ball and run with it, man. I love it.
Well, let me tell you, with Auburn playing Indiana today, I'll share a quick story. They met in the NCAA tournament in 1987 in the second round in Indianapolis, Indiana, in what was then in the Hoosier Dome.
Yeah, I knew that site.
A couple of just funny asides on that game. Auburn was on fire to start. They could score the basketball. Sonny Smith's offense was working to perfection. They jumped ahead of Indiana. that was an Indiana team that went on to win the national championship with Steve Alford. Auburn jumped ahead something like 22-4.
24-10. Yeah, I remember.
Bobby Knight calls timeout. My press row seat was right behind the Indiana bench. And during that timeout, Bobby Knight went one-on-one with each of his players and invented 4-letter words that I'd never heard of. He excoriated, just verbally destroyed every single player on his bench. Then he turned his attention to the officials and did the same to them. I think the next 7, 8, 9 whistles went against Auburn.
Yeah.
Now, Auburn wasn't very good defensively. They weren't going to beat Indiana. Indiana ended up winning 107-90. But there was a moment in the game. The Auburn players had a huddle at the free throw line, and Steve Alford tried to lean in to listen. And Gerald White, who could have played defensive back if he hadn't played.
Oh, I remember him. Yep.
He turned, and Alford's trying to lean into the huddle, and Gerald White gives him a 2-hand shove in the chest. Now, in the state of Indiana at that time, Bob Knight was God, and Steve Alford was Jesus. His was his son.
Yes.
So with 40,000 Indiana fans in the Hoosier Dome, when Gerald White shoved Steve Alford, immediately the boos rained down. Sonny Smith and Bob Knight almost went nose to nose.
I remember that so well.
After the game, someone asked Bob Knight in the postgame about White shoving Alford and said, do you think he was trying to intimidate Steve Alford? And he said, Gerald White trying to intimidate Steve Alford is like a sparrow trying to rape an elephant. There's Bob Knight in a nutshell right there.
Yeah.
Later in that same tournament, Auburn played Indiana played LSU. Duff's off we talk about this now. Played LSU in the Elite Eight, and that was not one of LSU's better teams. I think they were like an 11 seed or something like that. But LSU had Indiana on the ropes. I mean, they had the game won, and of course, Coach Knight being Coach Knight, they interviewed him after the game. He said, well, I mean, they had us beat. I mean, we had no way to beat them. They had better athletes. But then I looked down at the LSU timeout and saw who was running the timeout, Dale Browne, and I knew we were in pretty good shape then.
Yeah.
Was that the game, Dave, that Knight pounded the phone on the scorer's table?
I think so.
That LSU game. It might have been that LSU game.
Yeah, I was watching on Armed Forces television in Germany.
That Indiana team, they beat UNLV in the Final Four. Indiana won the national championship. They beat Syracuse. Keith Smart's last second jump shot.
Yep.
UNLV made it to the Final Four. That UNLV team played at Auburn, Doug, if you remember that year.
Yep.
Auburn played Florida on Saturday in Beardy's Memorial Coliseum. They played UNLV on Sunday.
Yep.
I was doing a big story on UNLV. This would never happen today. I wanted to do a story on Freddie Banks, who was a huge scorer for the Rebels. And I was staying at the old Best Western in Auburn, as was the UNLV team. I contacted the SID. I said, can I get an interview with Freddie? He said, yeah, man, he's in room like 102. Just go knock on the door. I go knock on the door. Freddie, this is Saturday morning. Freddie and his roommate, they're in there watching cartoons. So I interviewed 2 UNLV players in our hotel room while they were watching cartoons. The night before, we went to what was the Italian restaurant in Auburn at the time? Well, it may have been an Opelika, Doug, but the Tarkanian, the entourage of UNLV, they had to have 20 seats behind their bench in Auburn for their entourage.
Yeah,
and this was out of a mob movie. I felt like I was in The Godfather at this dinner with Jerry Tarkanian and all of his Vegas friends. It was an unbelievable memory.
Scarbo, was that team that you were relating that got that jumped out to a big lead over Indiana and that slipped away? Was that Sonny Smith's team that he was on the ropes and they had to play 4 straight days in the SEC tournament to win?
No, that was 2 years earlier. That was 85.
Okay.
Yeah, that's when Sonny had resigned.
Yeah.
And they made that run. They beat Wimp in Alabama in the SEC tournament final to make the NCAA tournament. Then Auburn went on to the Sweet 16 and lost.
Played North Carolina. Yeah.
And then the next year they went to the Elite Eight with Frank Ford and West Person
as a senior. Yeah.
Yeah. Lost to Louisville. I remember out in Houston. And we were down in Bimini for spring break watching it at a bar called Hemingway's. And that was the height of Miami Vice and the drug war. And we're in there, and there's a guy talking to us wearing the typical, Havana shirt. And I looked, and I'm like, wow, there was an Uzi in the back pocket. And we're in there. I'm going, I hope he's not a Louisville fan. We're all 27 of us from Auburn. And but I'll never forget, Auburn beat Thursday night. Auburn beat UNLV in Houston. We were coming in. We were coming off the boats there in Bimini. Of course, every other they were offering us, flowers and everything else they have down there in Bimini. But that was an incredible time. Bobby Knight could intimidate an official like nobody else. I mean, and that's the thing about him. And I pulled up a montage of David Letterman appearances that Bobby Knight would have on. Letterman used to he goes, get Bobby Knight on the phone. He would call the secretary and he'd go, Coach Knight, and he'd get on there. He used to come on the Letterman show, again, back when late night TV was funny. But those basketball games will absolutely drive you crazy. Here's a question here, Kelly Lee. Be that as it may, FSU did what was required, went undefeated and got screwed. I think it's right what Ben Troop said. The ACC, if it's not as strong top to bottom, or at least the top half, that hurts a team like Florida State. And guys are always going to get hurt. The story in the perfect world would have been, look what they did with their third team quarterback. But that ain't how it works. And Doug, all of y'all have pointed that out. Next year, you're right. 13 and 14 should have got in. But I do think it's making the interest in college football. The top 25 next year in November, every team ranked in that top 25 is going to be saying there's a chance we make the playoff. I think the interest and the eyeballs, look, I gave Deion credit in Colorado for getting a lot of people to stay up late at night, which we all did watching Pac-12 football. But if you want to see a Lazarus story, forget about Deion, because the only three players anybody can name are his two sons and Travis Hunter from Sewanee, Georgia, Collins Hill High School, is the coach at Northwestern, Kevin. Talk about what he did after Pat Fitzgerald, 19 years on the job, most successful coach in Northwestern history. And they won 7 or 8 games and had a few other ones they could have won. That's the best story in college football outside of the Army-Navy game later today.
Yeah, you talk about overcoming adversity and you remember all the controversy swirling around Northwestern, the allegations of hazing, which were very ugly, obviously, and to step into that maelstrom and calm the waters, to get that team focused and to do what they did. It's a tribute to him, and it's a tribute to those players. And I wanted to share that Dave, you especially will appreciate this. Maybe the coolest story from the Super 7. Leroy, small school in South Alabama. They're the defending state champions, 1A, the smallest classification. Back in September, their head coach, Jason Massey, he had been a member of the National Guard for 30-something years. He got deployed in September after the season had begun. We don't know where he is. He's at an undisclosed location. So the assistant coach took over as interim coach and guided them to an undefeated season. They got back to the state championship game. They won it the other day. They won it on Thursday. And after the semifinal game, Chan Lowe is the interim coach. After the semifinal game that they won to get to the state championship game, they FaceTimed with Jason Massey, their head coach, at his undisclosed location in the post-game locker room. How cool is that?
That is so cool.
You got a high school football coach, long time, who has spent a longer time as a member of the National Guard. This, I understand, was his 3rd deployment. Now, you talk about someone to be held up as a role model, an example. Jason Massey is certainly that. So it was really cool to see them finish the job and win another state championship.
Leroy, Alabama. Sammy Coates played there, threw a 97-mile-an-hour fastball.
Well, Army's got a linebacker named Leo Lowen. You'll see today, number 31. He's our best defensive player. He's got a 3.98. He's already started his own nonprofit. He'll end up as either, Secretary of Defense, President of the United States. He may play in the NFL. And that's, I think, what's so cool about today's game is that there are people like that. Navy's kicker is probably going to be a Rhodes Scholar. So I love, that's another element about the Army-Navy game that I love so much.
Yeah. I mean, and Kevin, you pointing out that story, this is why it's so important we have newspapers. The smartest people that I know are the most well-read. My mom, 88 years old, minimum 2 books a week she reads. Dad at 95, same thing. Three word search puzzles a day. Keep those synapses in the brain firing. But it's these sidebars, these stories. Doug Dean, Kevin, and you know, Dave and I, we joke this is Savant Saturday, but it is just that story about Leroy right there. That's what we love about sports. And Doug, I don't know if you heard what Kevin just said about the coach at Leroy being deployed.
Yep.
And damn right, we don't need to know where he is, because you know what? He may be, yes, he's serving his country, but more importantly, he's serving the man to his left or the right, or the people around him, their brothers. That's the story right there that only Kevin Scarbinsky could bring to the table. Doug, jump in.
Yeah. By the way, did y'all in the first hour before I got out of the woods, did y'all comment at all on the new NCAA head Baker's proposal, $30,000 per player?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, we'll save it for another day. But
No, we did, but I want your take on it.
Well,
and
I guess what none of this is original. I'm just trying to forecast this chaos like everybody else. But it seems like the point of view that where we are headed is going to be a very similar to NFC and AFC in the NFL, where you know, oddly enough, there were 32 NFL teams, and I think that the number. I'd love y'all's reaction to this. How many programs are there right now that would meet this minimum required $30,000 per player, if I've got that right? And oh, by the way, you have to spend equal amount of money on women's athletes. So I think it's going to work out to 30 to 40 programs is my wild guess. What do you guys think that's sustainable, or will college football mostly become the big boys with 12 teams in the playoff? And that means nearly half of those 30 or 40 teams have a chance to make the playoff. Is that where we're headed?
Well, Kevin, Hollywood Squares for $50.
You know, that Baker's proposal, I think, is I think it's a trial balloon. I think it's more of a lead balloon, to be honest. I think it's the NCAA's attempt to maintain some control over the most powerful football programs in the country. It's not going to fly.
Yeah.
But if it did, and remember, this is not even a proposed piece of legislation. It's really a talking point.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, in an indirect way, an attempt, even though they say there's no cap, it's an attempt to put a cap on it by putting the conditions on it of making it equal with women's athletics based on Title IX, et cetera. But the larger point is you're asking, Doug, no, there are Power 5 schools that probably would not want to do that. That would not pony up. So it wouldn't be what do we have now? 65 Power 5 schools plus Notre Dame, something like that. You wouldn't have that many in that division. Inevitably, they're going to break away from the NCAA in some way, while figuring out how to keep their other sports affiliated with the NCAA, because obviously it's important for track and baseball and swimming to be able to compete. You don't want to have to compete nationally. You don't have to travel nationally. Although some conferences are going to be doing that starting next year, especially, with their Olympic sports. But this is not going. That I have extreme confidence that proposal, as discussed, or that idea, will not see the light of day at the end of the day.
And then a subplot I'll follow is take the curious case of Vanderbilt, who year in, year out really does not play college football as we think of it. And if that's unkind to Vandy fans, mea culpa. But would a Vanderbilt, or pick any other school you want, would they opt in to that 30,000 per player. And I agree with you, Kevin. That's a straw man. They're going to shoot it apart. Something else will end up getting adopted. You can't legally ask a school like Vanderbilt in football to exit the SEC because of the original charter, but that Vanderbilt in this scenario would be required to opt in. So there may be schools on the bottom tier of given conferences that financially say, no, we choose not to opt in, but we'll continue to play basketball and baseball in the league.
Even your Mississippi States, is that financially viable for them? Although, and I will say, guys, at that, it just made me think mentioning Mississippi State made me think of last night's 6A championship game. Ron Ingram from the Alabama High School Athletic Association used to be actually my first boss at the Birmingham News. He was hired as the prep editor the year that I did the season I did my internship there out of the University of Florida. Ron is as knowledgeable about high school athletics as anyone in the state of Alabama. But he said there were more than 100 college coaches requested credentials for last night's 6A championship game. And the entire Mississippi State staff, there were whatever the maximum number you can have on the road, that's how many Mississippi State requested just to be there and have their presence known.
Let me throw this out there at you. Okay, Kevin, I know you've got 2 boys, and I don't know how many kids you have, Dave. Doug has 3 girls. I have 2 boys and a daughter, and I've remarried, and I've added Mallory that went to Alabama. Love her. So I have 2 boys, 2 girls. When we talk about NIL, we're not saying we don't care about the women's sports. We don't care about women. We're talking about the free market. So I get really frustrated if anyone were to say that you're attacking women's sports. That's not it. It's what people are willing to pay to go see. And the bottom line is people are going to pay. The free market will dictate what happens. It always does. And whenever we try to legislate something, so you can't legislate a lazy person to first place in the Boston Marathon. It's not going to happen. These people that win the Boston Marathon, most of them, speaking of Catholic schools, go to St. Patrick's Catholic School in Kenya. There's a Catholic priest over there that runs with them. I've seen documentaries on this, and they talk about when you are running and training, they say, you better learn to run because there are lions, there are cheetahs, there are leopards. I mean, you learn to run fast and you're motivated, but you cannot legislate. You cannot make a person into anything. You have to grow organically. And
like I said earlier,
yeah,
I've got a startup, a West Point football player and a West Point wrestler.
Yeah.
And they are doing this NIL program, and their launch market are women hockey players. They're going to make millions and millions and millions of dollars themselves, but more importantly, they're going to impact the lives of so many women as they go through adolescent, into college, and into collegiate sports. And it's a for-profit startup. Let the free market. They saw a pain point, and it's like we're not gonna solve this through entitlement. We're going to solve this through a commercial enterprise that's solving a problem, and let the free market do it.
Yeah, and look, let me say this: the athletic departments at the powerful universities will eventually operate independently of the schools. Athletes will be paid and also have an opportunity to earn a degree. Too much money, and that's a lot to think about. Now, those comments are so big they kind of covered up Kevin and Doug, but didn't mean to do that. But look, let's take a quick break. I want to come back and talk about that because I've been talking with NIL people at different schools. And bottom line, this stuff is just getting started. And you have poked the bear at Auburn and Georgia and Alabama. And I just checked. They've got a few passionate fans. But what you're finding is those big name donors everyone loves to talk about with opium, other people's money. It ain't just them. It's a populist movement. And I had a meeting with somebody in Atlanta Wednesday for lunch. Listen, man, these SEC schools are where they are because they invest. And it does matter. Take a quick break from one of our sponsors. We'll be right back. We've got Kevin Scarbinsky, the Birmingham Lede, Doug Dean, Birmingham AU Dose, Dave Tompkins in the Low Country, Beaufort, South Carolina, right after this.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am R.A. Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.
Yeah. He's deaf. Oh, was he yelling? Where?
There's Dave.
Okay. All right. Rob Browne back here with you on this Saturday, man. Fun conversation. Love having this. It's not a debate. It's a conversation about what's happening in college athletics. I think the NIL, the people, I know the NIL deals, they operate independent of the universities. They don't have to go through the channels, the bureaucracy, my favorite thing, the paperwork, all that stuff. They're operating independently. So take the politics out of it, because most university administrators, for lack of a better descriptive term, move at glacial speed. Doug Dean, you know him. Kevin, you know him. Dave, you know him. There's some Auburn boosters, Alabama boosters, Arkansas, Georgia boosters that have money and will spend it to get a product. Now, that rate of return on investment, better show up early on, Doug. Yeah, Doug. Well, here we go.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me is when you link this all to the National Football League, they need more than 50, 60 college football programs as a supplier, as a developer of the talent. So, I think the NFL is going to have an interest in, if the way this plays out because of TV money and NIL and on, then what happens to those other 60 plus college football programs that are a supplier of NFL talent, and what is to motivate those schools to continue to try to invest money in a football program when they can't sell to their fans that we might be playing for a national championship?
Well, I know one thing. Lauren Smith, legendary, still part of the Georgia football broadcast crew since 1972, sat on sidelines, and I think y'all heard him a few weeks ago. Why not have the NFL help pay for NIL? Look what Major League Baseball does with the farm system. And Doug, that is a great dichotomy right there. This power, these 65, but there are 133, so that makes 68 more. They've got to have, plus Division II and Division III. They're going to send players too. You better be careful about just having a cabal of people. I mean, what we love in America, we love underdogs. We do. That's why we love horse racing. That's why we love Old Yeller. I heard a guy describe how Florida State, Mike Norvell, and Florida State's football players and the team must feel. He said it was so bad, it was like Old Yeller getting run over on the highway, and you got to go scrape him up and tell the kids what happened. I mean, that was a tough blow for Florida State. But Kevin, jump in here, man. I mean, the coffee's kicking in.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Rob, because I can argue strongly and probably will continue to do so, that the committee made the right decision in putting Alabama in ahead of Florida State. That doesn't mean that I don't feel for those Florida State players.
Yeah.
And for Mike Norvell and his staff. And again, all we have to do is flash back to 2004 with players and coaches that I knew a lot better, that I actually knew. I mean, I don't know these guys at Florida State. I don't cover them, but I knew those guys at Auburn. And again, I saw Carnell the other night at the Super 7. You know, that's a hard thing to deal with. And by the way, the outrage brigade from Florida State, you know, releasing all these sternly worded statements. If you're going to do that, you get your facts right. The university president said never in the history of the BCS/college football playoff had an undefeated Power 5 champion been denied a shot at the postseason.
Right.
Again, 2004 Auburn says hello, you know. So we have hearts, you know. We feel for these guys. Florida State had a wonderful season. They had a fantastic season, and it's a shame that the system that they put together that was doomed at some point, even though the 4-year playoff only had a short lifespan of 10 years. When you build a system that has 4 spots and you have 5 at the time, Power 5 conferences, you are setting yourself up for a situation like this to happen. And right at the very end of the 4-year playoff era, it did.
And in my opinion, before we get too worked up and try to overregulate NIL, let's remember that TCU was in the national championship game last year. I mean, and as you open it, expand it from 4 teams to 12 teams, there's a pathway. I say it too many times on the show, and it's my heart, not my head. But my team, as long as Coach Monken is there, we have a chance to maybe get in as a 12 seed one time. And boy, that's all I want. That's all I want. That I will be vindicated for college football for the rest of my life and into my afterlife. And so let's stop the regulation. Let's let free market, you know, prevail in college football as well. And good university presidents will make sure that dollars going into the football program also get, you know, parsed out to the revenue sports and to, you know, there's obviously Title IX, but even more to women's sports. It will happen with good universities. So let's just stop the regulation, in my opinion.
Dave, you got Army pulling it off today?
Yes, I think the bet the house bet is to bet on the under. I think the over under is 28. The under has covered the last 18 times. You know, they said that people said that Navy is the worst 5-6 team in the country, and we're the best 5-6 team. That means the game's going to be super, super, super close. 9 of the last 12 Army Navy games have come down to the last possession. So, you know, for your viewer's guide, you know, watching option football in the second and third quarter can be a little bit boring, and you probably have Christmas shopping to do. So tune in at 2:45 Eastern for the march on, and then the invocation and the national anthem is the best national anthem you hear all year. You know, see the F-35s and the AH-64s fly over. And then tune in around 5:45 or 6, sort of midway through the fourth quarter, to watch probably the climatic last drive. Hopefully it's Army, and then the you know, break out your handkerchief moment, the alma maters.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean it's what we love about college sports, and I want to give credit. And y'all know Philip Marshall. I think he's a great writer. I didn't know his dad, but Benny Marshall, legendary sports editor of the Birmingham News, and Philip writes on Auburn Undercover. And it's important you always give credit, because this show is not possible without Dave, without Frank, without Kevin, without Doug, and all of our guests, and Audrey, of course, and our supporters, our sponsors. So you always give credit. Philip Marshall nailed it this week in Auburn Undercover, some points. We said, you know, basically the whole most deserving versus 4 best is the bogus creation. Did anyone really believe TCU was one of the 4 best teams last season, or Cincinnati a year or 2 before that? Kevin, tee it up here right now. Take us down the fairway on this one.
Well, Philip makes a good point. It's never been either or. It's a combination of you do have, and this is what bothers me when people say, well, the games don't matter. Yeah, of course they matter. Yeah. And in the last game, Alabama beat the undefeated number 1 team that had a 29-game winning streak and had won the last 2 national championships. And I know last year's not supposed to matter. The year before is not supposed to matter. You're only supposed to consider what those teams did this year. But that was a massive win. It was in the state of Georgia, not in Athens, of course, but it was in the state of Georgia. And so the games absolutely mattered. The fact that Alabama beat the teams that it beat, the fact that the SEC had 5 of the top 13 teams in the final college football playoff poll, while the ACC had 1 of the top 14, makes a difference. It's because the games mattered. And we feel for Florida State, but the committee got it right.
Doug Dean, if I'm going to court, my closing argument will be made by one Kevin Scarbinsky, who grew up in the shadows of
in another life, Rob, in another life, I was an attorney. And in another life beyond that, I was a New York City cab driver.
There you go. but Doug, I credit you, Kevin. You chronicled it on Twitter every day. Go ahead, Doug.
Kevin can turn a phrase or 3. We know that. And but Kevin also is, if we get to choose who we go up against in a debate, I will choose not to play Kevin Scarbinsky.
Yeah,
I'll tell you. Thank you for that compliment. You know who you do not want to debate is Kaiser Scarbinsky, my older son, who has taken. I have created a monster because he can take my argument. He can take his argument and beat mine. He can take mine and beat his. He has gone. He's only 20. He's gone so far beyond me already that he has certainly taken after his dad, much to his mom's chagrin.
That's so funny.
It to me is. I love the fact that, again, when you read, the more you read, it's like lifting weights with your brain because it improves your vocabulary. I read what Doug Dean puts out in the Birmingham Lede. You, Kevin. I mean, I've been reading you since 84, 85. And that's cool now to have you on this show. Maury Gaston introduced me to Dave Tompkins. We jokingly call this Savant Saturday. But if you don't read and you don't do all of this, you don't know. Like I'll read something that Doug writes, and it's a lot of it's about Auburn, but it's about the big picture. And it takes all the craziness and just funnels it down into, it's like money managers. There are thousands of stocks to choose from in the universe, and you might whittle it down to 25 or 30, a mixture of large and mid-cap stocks, mid-cap, small and mid-cap. You have to funnel it down. The great writers, I love to do this, Dave, to both of these guys. I'm going to throw it to Kevin first and then Doug, and then we're going to listen to it. You, at that game Saturday in Atlanta, and we went there, like I said, I should have applied for press credentials. I didn't know till Thursday I was going. There were a lot of Bama fans. If there's a game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, if it's Georgia, Auburn and Alabama, there are so many Auburn and Alabama fans in Atlanta. It's laughable. I mean, they could have a crowd without anybody coming in from another state to fill up that stadium. But you talked about 29 straight wins for Georgia. That winning streak started against Alabama in the 21 national championship game in Indianapolis. It ended against Alabama in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. 29 wins. Tony Barnhart said on the show Tuesday morning, he said, and y'all know he's a Georgia alum. And he said, the committee got it right. Georgia didn't do what they needed to do. There was that fear that it could happen, but Michigan, Washington, Texas, Alabama, those are the 4 that are in there. But Kevin, what was your takeaway from Saturday, kind of going into it and after the game? And then Doug, I want yours.
Well, I don't know why David Pollack springs to mind as you asked me about what happened Saturday in Atlanta. David was so confident in his prediction that Georgia was going to win. But when he said, 4 days before the SEC championship game, that Kirby Smart is clearly, and he punched the word clearly and repeated it, clearly a better coach than Nick Saban, that was laughable on its face, and that's not an insult to Kirby. But when he gave his reasons, Georgia doesn't turn the ball over. Georgia does not commit penalties. Georgia does not beat itself. And what happened on Saturday? Georgia turned the ball over in the shadow of its goal line, leading to a field goal, and a field goal was the difference in the game. Who had more penalties in the game for more negative yardage? Georgia. Alabama only had 3. Georgia had 5. So and then, of course, he said Georgia beat Georgia. Come on now. I mean, that's not giving credit where it's due to Alabama, because realistically, and this maybe surprisingly, Alabama was the more physical football team on both lines.
Absolutely.
And that to me was, if you want to say what was surprising about that game, just that Alabama was able to impose its will physically.
Yeah.
And you saw that in Alabama's first drive, I think, which was a field goal drive, and then in Georgia's second drive, which was I think it ended in a punt. The game being won at both lines of scrimmage.
Yeah. Doug Dean.
Well, first of all, and I said this a week ago, if memory serves, I feel, and sorry if this sounds self-serving, I don't really mean it to be, but I think Coach Saban, if interviewed, would say, in a weird way, the pressure cooker of that Iron Bowl was helpful to Alabama in preparing for a tough game against Georgia. They were able to feel only a week later more comfortable having had a dress rehearsal with a high-pressure game. And they also, I think, maybe Hugh Freeze's staff put some things on film that Georgia was possibly going to exploit, but Saban is so good at preparation and game planning, he eliminated those weaknesses by the time the Georgia game rolled around. Second point, Rob, I've always felt like we can debate best and most deserving, but I've always felt like at the heart of what the committee does, selection committee, it's about the distribution of political power across the Power Five conferences. And there are some years where the teams scream at them too loud, like 2011. You had to let Alabama get a second chance, even though they didn't have to play the SEC championship game. And so in those years, they have a real strong argument to set aside political power. But all things being equal, they're very motivated to throw a bone to as many of the Power Five conferences as they can. And if they didn't do that, they would start to be challenged about the fairness of it. And secondly, there's Georgia. The Georgia Bulldogs have as big an argument as anybody that they should have been considered to be among the four. They're just unlucky that their quality loss came at the very end of the season.
Yeah, that's great takes by Kevin, by Doug. David, you think about this. People don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. But Nick Saban is 10-1 in SEC championship games. Again, you go back and you go back and you look, the pressure cooker. Doug's right.
He's 4-0 against
that
Georgia.
Prepared Alabama for that. Now, you can't shoot at people in training for combat readiness. You can be as real as it gets, but nothing is like reality. And guys I know that went to Panama on 3rd Ranger Battalion said, man, you'd be surprised who the tough guys were. It's a lot of those guys that look like Woody Allen that are leading the charge, and the guy that looks like, the Hulk, he's got weakness. It's just different. But that pressure cooker, Doug, that's the best point I've heard. It prepared. And also, Kevin, and I think that all week long, Bama had to struggle to beat a 6-6 Auburn team. There's no transference of circumstances. People always do that. Look, it's like I tell people, the stock market, what'd you do today, Browne? The market was down 1,200 points. I'm like, it was? I don't look at that. That's a snapshot for people, and it's a courtesy. It's in the paper if they're selling their shares that day. That's it.
Hey, two of the most laughable arguments that Florida State supporters and anti-Alabama people made against the Crimson Tide getting into the playoff was what you just said. They struggled against a 5-6 Auburn team or a 6-6 Auburn team in Jordan-Hare Stadium. Obviously, these people are unfamiliar with the Iron Bowls in Auburn and the history there. That is, as I would argue, that on that occasion, that day, that is the most difficult place to win in college football.
Amen.
Tougher than Ann Arbor, tougher than Columbus, tougher than Gainesville, tougher than Tallahassee, anywhere you want to name. For Alabama to go to Auburn, it is the hardest place to win in college football. And the evidence is there. It's over decades. We've seen it now time and time again. And the second part of that is they needed a Hail Mary. That last touchdown pass was not a Hail Mary. Can we please get someone to understand what a Hail Mary is? A Hail Mary is, it's the prayer in Jordan-Hare. It's throw and hope. That was a design play in which Auburn, as we sorry, Doug, to again relive that memory, but Auburn allowed Jalen Milroe to pick out a receiver, allowed the receiver to get one-on-one with a DB. That was not a throw and hope for a tip and a deflection. And no, that was not a Hail Mary. And it was not, that was a compliment to Alabama more than it was a criticism of Alabama that they were able to beat Auburn the way it played that day in Jordan-Hare.
The play is Gravedigger, and it will live in infamy in the annals of Auburn football.
Thank goodness for Isaiah Bond, and you got to love his James Bond touchdown celebration. Thank goodness that he divulged the name of the play because Jalen Milroe wouldn't do it, Nick Saban wouldn't do it. Thank you, Isaiah Bond.
Yeah,
absolutely. I challenge any team to have Auburn as your arch rival, and to have to go to Jordan-Hare every other year and win four times in a row. You can't do it.
And you know what? No, I agree with you. And I've actually been able to be down on the field before in an Iron Bowl in Birmingham and other places, getting to work for CBS in college or ESPN or something. There's nothing to compare to. And that you have to appreciate that, and you got to respect. You have to give credit. I always learned from my parents, don't be a baby, don't be a bad sport. I always go shake hands with as many of the opposing team's fans as I can after a loss like that, because it takes away my pain by sharing in their elatedness or whatever you want to call it. But it sucks, but you can't be a jerk and make excuses. Doug?
Kevin, you'll love this. Thanks a lot, Senator Tuberville. You just had to invoke that fear of the thumb deal. And now we get that going into next year.
That's right. Hey,
now there's going to be fear of the Gravedigger.
All you need to know about the degree of difficulty of Alabama playing at Jordan-Hare Stadium is that Nick Saban is 5-4 there.
Right.
During the greatest run in college football history against an Auburn program that has ridden a roller coaster during that time, is the highest highs and some of the lowest lows. Nick Saban's 5-4 against that program.
He's 4 wins. He did never win at LSU.
Yeah, he's got a losing record there overall. If you add,
he has a losing record at LSU.
And he is 4-0 against Georgia in the SEC championship.
Yeah, 10-1
close.
overall.
Great.
Yeah,
perfect.
But
there you go.
But in fact, New Mexico State has a better record in Jordan-Hare than Nick Saban.
Right.
Percentage-wise, yeah. And again, I like, and there's no talk about the patty cake. That's what I'm going to call Auburn's pass rushing thing because, and it'll go down forever. Look, we ran out of time. We started the show inauspiciously, Kevin and Doug. Frank and Dave and I were on, and the first 22 minutes,
we were so brilliant.
He said, "Are you having technical difficulties?" I forgot to hit the go live button, so we went a little bit long today.
So you were just talking amongst yourselves.
Yeah, having a bagel and a knish. We're talking amongst ourselves. Coffee talk with Mike Myers.
Go Army.
Go Army. Look, Kevin, tell them how they can keep up with you and all the great work you do. Doug Dean, AU Dose in Birmingham, Dave Tompkins joining us always on Savant Saturday. But this has been a lot of fun. And real quick, one thing, get out to Hewlett & Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee today. They're open every day of the week now, Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., Sundays, 1 to 5 p.m. You know it, they're the second largest Filson dealer in the Southeast. They got more duck heads, shirts, jackets, pants, blazers. They've got 7,000 pairs of men's and women's boots. They've got Schaefer Outdoors. That's Rip's Jacket. They're the consultants for the wardrobe for the TV series Yellowstone. And they've got kids' boots, kids' toys. They've got everything. HewlettandDunn.com. Proud to have them as a sponsor. Kevin, tag us out.
Yeah, follow me on Twitter at Kevin Scarbinsky. Best way to keep up with all my stuff. You can go to Birmingham Lede, LEDE.com. Read my Monday columns. Go to al.com/sports to sign up for my weekly Thursday newsletter, Scarbo Knows. And you can keep up with me that way. I hope you will.
All right, man. Unbelievable stuff. We'll be off Sunday. We'll be back Monday morning. Merry Christmas, everybody. Have a great weekend. We are out of here.
See you guys.